Welcome to Beyond the Call podcast, where we tell the stories of those people behind the jobs we rely on. We go into the good, the bad and the ugly, and we shine a light in what can be a dark place. Just a warning, the content can be graphic and distressing, so please use your discretion. Please like and subscribe on your podcast platform and our social media. And if you have feedback, I read every single one. Let's get on to this episode of Beyond the Call. G'day folks, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Call. Now, this podcast is about people in occupations that involve trauma, and most of us think that the usual occupations are things like first responders, defense, that type of thing. But it's important to remember there is so many more that we don't think about. And over the next few weeks, I'll be hosting people from all sorts of different occupations. But we're going to start off with my guest today, and it's my pleasure to welcome Amy Taylor to the show. Amy, welcome.
Hi, so good to see you.
So Amy Taylor is now based in New York, but she's a bit of a jet setter all around the world. Welcome, Amy. So Amy holds a degree in molecular biology, easy for me to say, and has an MBA. She's a qualified pilot. She's a model. She's an advocate, and she's also a high-class escort. We're going to go through this whole story and find out what the go is. So, Amy, where did you grow up, and how was your childhood?
I mean, pretty normal. My dad is a retired professor. I grew up, he taught in Pennsylvania when I was a baby. And then when I was about 6 or 7, we moved to California and I grew up there. I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley and then I moved to Los Angeles for my MBA. As you said, I was, my undergraduate work, I studied molecular biology. I worked in biotech for 2 years, almost 2 years in between undergrad and grad school. Didn't love it, wasn't that great at it. So that's why I pivoted into business because I wasn't really qualified to do anything else. Modeling started when I was 14 in high school and was always something I had available to me part-time. But I didn't become tall enough or famous enough to do it full-time. But it's always throughout while I've been in school or working or doing other things, I've also modeled. And largely because it was fun and easy and paid the bills because I had this face and this body and why not? And then the flying, which yes, I've also added, that was simply, I got my private a lot earlier just because I loved it. My mom's dad was a pilot, so I think it was in the blood. And what happened was I wanted to fly bigger, faster stuff. And it becomes a pretty expensive hobby. So I decided to do it for a living simply because I couldn't afford to do it as just a hobby. You have to be like idiotically rich for that. And I am not. And it was also something I could do during the 2008 Great Recession. There was like no modeling work and I had worked in oil and that was kind of in a rut. So I just got all my instructor licenses and my instrument multi-engine tickets and flew more seriously because honestly, there was nothing else to do. So that's how that happened. It was kind of turning a hobby into a profession. And so I flew cargo and I flew charter and I've taught. I've never flown for the airlines, but I've flown in a variety of other ways. And then the escort thing, yeah, I mean, I liked successful men. They liked me in college. I promptly was hit on by a very successful doctor when I was in undergrad. And honestly, he was better. Frat boys still wanted to use my body like all men do. Nothing wrong with that. That's the normal male sex drive. It's human. But they wouldn't even like buy me breakfast. And this guy was like, do you want to go to the opera or go to Tahiti for a week? Honestly, he was better. I'm sorry, but he was. And so who would you pick? Obviously, like a lot of pretty young women, I picked the better guy. The problem became, though, that he wanted to marry me and siphon me away as a doctor's wife in a small town. And I perhaps should have done that. It would have been a very easy and perfect life. But I did not want to. I wanted more freedom. So I had this rich boyfriend during college, during my undergrad, while studying biology and while working in biotech. And then when I went to do my MBA in Los Angeles, which is about 500 miles away from where he lived, the original plan was I'd do my MBA, I'd come back, we'd get married, I'd have to have kids. Didn't really want to, but that's the life most women society wants you to do, and I would have. But he cheated on me, and I dumped him, and I think I honestly wanted to get free of him. I think I did, honestly, looking back. It was just tough to admit to myself that he was the first and only man I had ever dated. Yes, he was successful. He was 10 and a half years older. Not like creepy old, but I think I wanted to be free. I wanted to make my own money. I wanted to pay my own bills. I wanted to live a full expression of a human life, not just go from a student to a wife and baby machine, which is what almost all women for all of human history have had to do if they were allowed to be students, which most of human history, they weren't even allowed to get educated. But I just wanted more for my life. But the problem was he yanked out the financial rug from underneath me because he was paying for my MBA, he was paying for my college, my car, not undergrad, but grad school and my car. And I suddenly found myself living in Los Angeles with no money and in school. So like a negative income, not only earning nothing, but actually giant bills for school. What should I have done? Probably should have dropped out of school and gone back and worked in biotech somewhere. Didn't want to. Didn't want to. I had heard about high-end escorting from a sorority sister of mine a few years earlier, had that somewhere in the back of my head and was like, yeah, well, I'll do that. That's what I have been doing with this doctor is the same thing. And honestly, it's pretty boring. I'm actually not that sure why people are fascinated by it. It's literally just dating. It's the exact same thing everyone on the dating apps is doing. It's just richer men and more beautiful women. That's it. And the dinners are a little fancier and the hotels might be better or whatever,
Yeah.
or not. But it's actually not that interesting. And so I figured out how to do that. It ain't rocket science. And
Was
off
that
to the
through a
races.
website?
What?
How did you get your dates? Was that through like a website or an app or?
Yeah, there's a million of them. It's just the
Yeah.
same as dating. There's dating websites the men are perfectly fine to provide. They don't have an issue with it. I think the only men who have an issue with it are men who don't have any money and wish that those women were cheaper or something. I don't know why. It's literally the same thing people have doing for all of human history. Men have said, "I want sex and I will provide for a woman." And women have said, "I want safety. I will have sex with you." Like, and I don't mean to be so reductionist. Look, I know escorts who have married their clients and they're perfectly happy 10, 12, 15 years in. Some have kids, some don't. Some didn't. Some wanted casual stuff and then to go be free, and that's okay too. All manner of things happen. It's my country makes it a big deal and makes it an issue. Uh, and I understand at the low end, there's some like drugs and violence and stuff. I never lived in that world. I don't know. I actually don't know that much about that part of it. Um, but there's literally it's utterly uninteresting at the high end. It's literally just dating. You see the same like 3 or 4 guys for like 10 or 15 years if you stay in it. It's actually super boring. Um, but America, I don't know, they make an issue of it and the way that they treat it adds a lot of problems to it. So because they're mad at it, escorts get shut out of banking and housing and they get shamed by their neighbors and like a whole bunch of things that totally don't need to happen. Um, because they criminalize the advertising, they make it less safe. So escorts end up meeting people that hurt them and rob them. And then because they can't go to court or like small claims and sue for payment like regular business, they use street justice or muscle like pimps to try to ensure payment. And that brings violence and harm. That does not need to happen. If it was a legitimate business, none of that would be necessary. I almost think they enjoy the hunting of pretty young women that they deem slutty and evil and Jezebel, and it's simply an envy thing. It's because they would like to control these young, beautiful women, and they can't, and they're mad at it. And they're also angry at the wealthy men who can have access to the best women. Well, that may be unfair, but welcome to reality. Wealthy people have access to the best of everything. I don't like that any more than anybody else does, but welcome to what being wealthy is. It sucks for the rest of
Yeah.
us. I've been on private jets. I'll never have one. Not even close. I can't even charter one. So I've seen the way they live. Yeah, it's better. It is. Sorry.
What's the legal status of escorting over there? Is
Yeah.
it illegal to actually do it, or is it just illegal to advertise as you alluded to just before?
Neither. There is nothing illegal about dating rich men that provide for you. In fact, most beautiful women do. I live in Manhattan. Most women don't make enough to live here if they're pretty. Some guy's helping them out. It might be their husband, it might be their boyfriend, they might have 2 or 3, whatever. There's nothing illegal about being an escort. What is illegal is to offer sex for money. However, what amuses me about that is that literally in all dating, men want sex. And they will literally say if they bought you a steak and you didn't have sex with them, that they didn't get a fair deal, which would imply that they only bought the steak to get sex, which would be prostitution, which would be illegal. So I think it's a funny law because for people who say that they don't allow paid sex, again, it is amusing to me that they think that women who have dinner and then don't have sex are somehow a scammer. Because to me, that would be a woman who's not breaking the law, right? So,
By its very
you tell me.
definition.
Well, you tell me what's paid sex, what's not. I joke. I joke. Of course, the reductionist thing of we don't care about each other and I hand you some money and I force you to suck my dick. That's a bit vulgar and classless. It's illegal. It probably should be. I never met anybody in my life who would talk to a woman that way, nor would I have let anybody talk to me that way. It would have been very odd. I've never had sex with somebody for money. I had sex with who I wanted for the reasons I wanted. And money was I've dumped billionaires. I mean, if you're not nice, I don't care what you offer me. It's my life, right? So, and I don't actually think most men want to sleep with somebody just because they can. I think most men actually also want somebody they like and who likes them, in addition to the physical attraction. My experience dealing with men has been that they also want connection every bit as much as a woman does, whether they met as an escort or on the street or in the office or anywhere else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, you look at the sites like the sugar daddy sites. That is essentially what you're doing, isn't it? You are just hooking up with, well, not hooking up. You are becoming a companion to rich people, and then what happens from there happens.
yeah, I don't know. I think on those my understanding of sugar babies is that yes, they would like the man to provide for them. Beauty is very expensive. It's thousands of dollars a month to have great nails, great skin, great hair, great clothes. I don't think women want to do all that for men who are the beneficiaries of said beauty. Without it, I don't think they want to go deeply into debt to do that for their boyfriend. So if they're young and poor, they do need the man to provide for it. Otherwise, it can't be paid for. But my understanding of sugar babies is that they go on a few dates to make sure they like each other, and there is no relationship if there's not also decent chemistry. So I don't think the money is something that's just like, okay, you have money, I'm hot. I think they also like to like each other. At least I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so again, to me, it seems fairly natural. This new era of women having jobs and money of their own only exists in a few places in the world, and it's only really in the last couple decades. I mean, when I was born, after I was born, 42 years ago in America was when they made it illegal for women to not be able to get a credit card or a home loan without a male cosigner. So when I was born, women in America were not able to get a credit card or a loan without a man. We had to have a man to have any access to credit or lending. So, of course, we had to sidle up to a man to get access to money. That was how it was in all of history. So now we have this. I mean, I have neighbors here in Manhattan who make more money than their boyfriends, but that is very new and very rare. So, the way it has been for all of history, where men had the money and women had to have a man to have money, is actually the norm until very recently and only in a few places. I mean, if you go to anywhere in the developing world and you try to date a woman, her father will literally ask all about your money before he will let you speak to his daughter. There's no shame in them. There's nobody going, "Oh, you're a gold digger." No, it's totally normal that the man will provide. That's the case still in most of the world, and if it's changing, that's great. But when I was born, you would not date a guy who would ask you to contribute bills. That did not exist when I'm 48. That was not a thing when I was young.
It's
Uh,
funny. The guy I'm 47, and as a male, you don't understand any of that stuff because you're not exposed to it.
what, money?
Well, the difference is between what the women were allowed to do and versus the men. It just wasn't
Oh,
something that, as a man or as a boy, you grew up. I didn't even know there was a difference.
did your mom make as much as your father?
My mum was a stay-at-home mum.
Yeah, so your father paid for everything and your mother slept with him. And I
Yep.
mean, they loved each other, but
I know what you mean.
well, but yeah, if your mother hadn't slept with your father, he would have left her for somebody who did, right? So
Hmm.
I'm joking, she's not a sex worker, but technically that's the fanciest and most legitimate form of sex work because if your mom hadn't slept your dad, he would have dumped her for somebody who would. And I'm and she did a lot more for him than just that. But yes, I mean, your mother would not have been able to probably survive financially and provide for you if she had not been compliant with your father. So women have always had to serve men. It's just what form. Uh,
Yeah.
and of course, marriage is the one that the law sanctions and gives the most social uh, credit to. That's the one that we like the best. But there have been other forms. I mean, most wealthy men have always had multiple women, whether they lied about it or not. Like Islam sort of has provisions for it with multiple wives, but every zillionaire on earth has had multiple women. We just sort of hide it because it pisses off the other wives, right? Whether they're actually wives or not. Um, and the ultimate
How much
pariahs,
kickback do you get for that type of statement? Because
everybody knows
the
it's
modern
true.
day woman is, dude, I'm without putting words in their mouth, I can almost hear the feminists going nuts about what you're saying.
Yes. So what feminists would like is for men not to be entitled to sex when they want it. They would like men to simply hear the word no and go without. And that may be the future we have, that men will not have brothels to go to or places they can go or, secretaries they can cheat on their wives with or whatever men have always done, babysitter, nanny, whatever, strip club. Um, I I think most men would fight that pretty hard. They'd either, even in the most conservative societies, Latin America, right? They're really Catholic and they pretend to be very traditional. They tend to stay married, but there's brothels everywhere. I mean, there's all kinds of them. Whether they're legal or not does not matter. They're everywhere. Uh, and they are in the first world too. I mean, there's prostitution, for instance, in places that punish it by death. That's how strong the drive is. That when people are risking death, they still do it. So yes, I I think from what I've seen, if you try to write laws against human nature, you typically fail, right? Um, but that doesn't mean we you don't make perfect the enemy of good. I think we would have to have a fundamental shift in the sex drive of men because they would have to have sex a lot less, and some of them can. There's a variance in the degree of horniness among adults. Some people are fine to have sex once a month, once every 2 months. Other people can't even think straight if they don't get laid a couple times a week, or they claim they can't. Now, could they change? Maybe. I don't know. That's a hypothetical that we haven't been able to test. What is a lot more likely to happen is that they're just gonna lie, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we've tried a lot of things to legislate against. I mean, the world does have a lot less violence than it did 1,000 years ago in terms of war and murder. So we've really chipped away at the inherently violent nature of some people, and we might continue to get better at that. Can we equalize the sex drive to this gap between how much sex men typically want and women? Again, with outliers being what they are. I know women hornier than their husbands and vice versa. I don't know. I don't think I'll live to see that, and I'm not really interested in a feminist or red pill manosphere utopia that isn't. I'm a lot more interested in the world that is than some hypothetical that people wish for, whether that's this feminist utopia where men don't want sex or the red pill manosphere where all women are traditional and obedient. Yeah, neither of those worlds exist. It's what's going on right now. I
Yeah.
know that when men hoard resources and are not going to let women have equal money and power, which I don't think anywhere in the world are women actually equal in net worth and positions of power yet. The Scandinavia, I think, is the closest, and they're not even close to equal. But I know as long as that's not true, then women will always finesse men to get. Because we're gonna live one way or another, right? We're not just gonna roll over and be homeless and die. So when you create a system of hegemony where one party has the power over the other, what you get is the low power party shucks and jives or finesses or lies or performs to get access to whatever crumbs they can. And what women typically did. Housewives, ask your grandmothers. They were usually fairly miserable, but they did what they had to survive, right? And it, feminists want a world that's different. Probably we all do. I think my sister makes more than her husband right now, and her husband says he loves it because he knows that she actually loves him because she could leave. Her finances are not tied to obeying him, right? So he's a great guy. He knows that she actually wants him for reasons other than his power over her because he doesn't have financial power over her. She actually wants him. So I think that's better. But ask a lot of people out there, they do not want women to make more money than men. I don't know why. I think it would be great. But be that as it may, I will never live to see a world. I will not live long enough to see a world in which that's the case if it ever comes. I don't think many men would allow it. I'm not sure
Yeah,
why.
I
You
think
think
if it is, it'll be generations and a massive cultural change. That's for sure.
well, and why not? Because again, then they would know that women actually want them. So it seems to me they set up their own misery because they complain about gold diggers, they complain about sugar babies, "You don't really love me, you just want my money." But then you don't let women have money. So what the fuck do you think is gonna happen? I don't know. I
Have your
mean,
cake and eat it too.
well, and women do the same thing. They tie a man down to monogamy and then they don't sleep with him and then they divorce him for cheating. So like
Hmm.
I have seen cases in which women were like, I didn't sleep with him for 2 years and then I got mad at him for cheating. And I'm sorry, but like, girl, what did you expect? I'm not
Yeah.
excusing cheating, but I would have. If you denied me, if I was married and a guy didn't sleep with me for 2 years, I wouldn't even be sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I joke. I
Now, when
joke.
when you grew up, did you grow up in poverty, or were you what sort of class would you have counted yourself as?
I'm middle. My dad was a professor. My mom was a stay-at-home, mom, mostly. She worked part-time here and there. We took vacations. We had a swimming pool. We didn't stay at the Four Seasons, but, we had more class than cash. Like, my dad speaks a lot of languages and published books and intellectual, but he was in academia. We weren't, like, rich. Like, I worked during college and I had scholarships and things. Um But we had ballet lessons and, we'd go to Europe a lot, but we'd stay with family to save money. We flew coach. We stayed at Marriott's, not, Ritz-Carlton's. But I had braces and never wanted for anything. I didn't go to private school. I went to public school, but good schools. My father was a refugee. He grew up in poverty and war. He grew up in Budapest and was a refugee in Paris and then moved to Amsterdam for high school and then the US for college. My mother's family's been in the US since the Revolutionary War. She was an Air Force brat, so, certainly a decent middle class life, but she didn't grow up rich either. Mm.
Yep.
So, yeah, no, I
Did
didn't,
she work when you were young?
who?
Did your mum work while you were young?
She worked part-time from home sometimes, but mostly she was a mom, PTA president, this and, cookie baking, and, we ate dinner together every night. I was very lucky. Again, my father wasn't rich, but he got tenure, so we had good benefits, good health care. She was able to stay home. We didn't have a huge house in the best neighborhood, but we were fine. And,
Yeah.
so, I remember we didn't always have the most name brand stuff. I remember some slight envy of kids who had more, but we were fine. Um,
Yeah.
she's not my mom's not like a super fancy woman. I'm higher maintenance than my mom was.
Were you always a people person?
Yeah. I really like people. I'm pretty romantic. I like to be in love or in relationships. That made me very good at my job. I like dating. I like men. I like traveling. I'm a fun hang. Like I'm very happy. I like to learn about people. I have a zillion hobbies. Until somebody's mean to me, I'm always approaching with kindness and love. And unfortunately, I've had to write people off, but only after they really forced that to have to be the case. Generally, I'm
Yeah.
an extrovert. Or I was homecoming queen, sorority sister, the typical debutante, like typical shit.
Yeah.
And
So,
boys
and
always like,
during the early part during the early part of your escorting career or your companion career, nobody from your family knew. Is that correct?
No, yeah, I was in the closet at first, which I would have liked to be the case forever. The reason I can talk to you now, there's millions like me, but they won't talk to you. The reason I can is I got outed. So, yeah, I would have liked to have lied simply because my family did not like it, obviously. This is not what anybody wants for their daughter, even though they suffered a lot of misinformation. So, what people know about it is only from like movies that are wrong and the low end stuff they see in the crime news. The reason people don't know anything about the high end is because we're paid for we give people privacy and we don't talk to people like you. So you have met high end escorts, you just don't know it. You saw them at Whole Foods or at yoga, you just didn't know it. And then when we're working, nobody sees us. We're on private jets and in private clubs. You never see us. We're ghosts in penthouses at the Ritz Carlton, and the hotels. No, they are paid to keep the billionaires happy, so they shut the fuck up just like we do. So, yes, I was in the closet. It was better. I liked it better. And then I got outed by somebody who wanted to control women, typical, and wanted to make money off me. And I told him to go fuck himself. And then he tried to harm me badly. And he did harm me badly. I put him in prison. But in the involvement of all that battle for a couple years, which involved my lawyers and going to court, um, it ended up in the public record, which I'm okay with. I made that decision, and I had to because he was actually one of the things he tried to do was unfortunately, he tried to kill me. I'm lucky that he was not successful. But in prosecuting and suing in America, those cases become public record. So to save my own life, he had outed me to my family, and then I had to out myself by suing him. I I thought about whether not to, and I'm sure that he thought I wouldn't, right? But given that he had outed me to the people I love, I thought at the time, lost everything, and I spent a couple of years in a deep trauma because of it. I decided getting justice was more important than the Google results forever, and I stand by what I did. My father, he asked if I thought about the shame I was bringing to my family, and I'm sorry for that. But what I just couldn't do was let David Elms get away with trying to murder me and hurt my family. I just couldn't let that stand. And so the decision between the public record stuff, which, we're working on trying to scrub it. France has right to be forgotten laws where you can scrub stuff. America doesn't have that yet. I don't know about Australia, but it would be great if someday I could scrub this stuff. But what's done is done now. Everyone who knows, my parents didn't talk to me for a couple years. Now they do. They love me in spite of my questionable choices and mistakes, which is a grace I don't deserve and I will never be able to repay. I'm lucky because many people in my industry, I'm sorry for the dog. Nigel, no, sorry.
That's okay. We can't hear it. I can't hear it.
Okay, good. He must have heard me talking about this trauma.
Mhm.
I, I, I just, when you go through something and you get your worst dirty laundry outed and your biggest mistakes, and you find out who loves you and who doesn't. My sister was visiting me here in Manhattan last week, and we were talking. She's like, I just didn't know what your life was really like. It was pretty uninteresting. Would go on a date with some guy for 18 years once a month. You travel with some boring guy. So it's I think as they've learned more, they've learned it's really no big deal, and the only part that's a big deal is the shame and stigma. So, my father, if his friends find out, which some have, the problem is they think he's a bad father because look what his daughter did. And whether they're wrong or not, which they are wrong, my father's fine, they're wrong, but that's because of what they know, what they think they know about it, which is wrong. Um, and it's wrong because we are in the closet and we can't tell you guys the truth. So the whole thing is mishigas, right? Because our clients demand us to stay in the closet, we can't talk about what it really is. Therefore, people fill the gap with nonsense. Therefore, we suffer shame and stigma when we're literally not doing anything else. Everyone else isn't also doing it's dating. It's just dating.
Yeah.
uh
I know before when you said that your dad eventually they came back, they love you, and you said you didn't deserve it. Why do you think you didn't deserve it?
Oh, I joke. I mean, I think we all deserve love. I think it's just, we disappoint those we love, and those we love disappoint us, right? Because no one is perfect. And I think that's why we often lie, people who cheat lie, and people who lie about their criminal records, and people don't have a podcast where they openly talk about trauma when I wish they would more, like what you're bravely doing. And the reason people omit or lie is because they think they'll be loved less, that they won't deserve love. Because frankly, when you dump your stuff on people, especially stuff they don't understand, like choosing to be a high-end companion, it shocks them because they're not ready. And we call it trauma dumping, right? People aren't ready and they don't know how to react. And sometimes that can make them a little nervous around you because they don't know how to act. The more we talk about it, like what you're doing, hopefully we'll get better with all this stuff. But my when I first got outed, my sister asked me if I really had gone to college. And I laughed. I said, You came to my sorority house. Do you think they just let people live there who are not in college? Because I mean, you came to some of my classes. She came to a lab I worked in. Do you think they just let people work there?
You had a very deep cover going.
I mean, but when I laughed, she said, I'm sorry, but the problem is you lied to me for years, so now I don't know what's true anymore. And look, I understand that. If you lie to people or omit, they don't know what to deal with. People like stuff that's easily figure outable. So when I say I don't deserve their forgiveness, I joke. I think, you know, we've all I don't even think what I did was a mistake, but I just think it would be easier for my family if I had not, right? And I
Yeah.
know that. Duh. Um, but they have all done imperfect things as well, which are theirs to deal with. Mine just well, and when this guy, his name's David Elms, the guy who came at me, your fans can Google David Elms murder, they can read all about it. Um, when he came after me, one of the things my sister said at the time, she had younger children. Her children are a little older now, but she said to me, "Did you ever think, he might come after us to hurt you? Did you ever think about us?" And the truth was, I hadn't. I had not. Because it didn't occur to me, because I wouldn't do that. It didn't occur to me that there are people like that out there, right? I didn't come from the streets. I never knew people like this monster. So I was perhaps a bit naive, and thank God nothing like that ever happened. But when you make choices, for your own survival, I wanted to pay rent and survive and maybe have a little fun. I didn't entirely think about the ways in which it could touch the people that I loved.
Yeah, I think it's funny when you say, from a layman, when you talk about a high end escort or a companion, and then you introduce the word pimp,
Mhm.
even though the pimp is essentially just a manager, I'm guessing, that by its definition, it's just someone who likes to take a chunk of your money for you doing your work. Um, the pimp has such a negative street role or a street connotation with it.
Yeah, so David Elms still partly owns a site called theeroticreview.com, and he was an internet pimp. So he wrote his site had searchable reviews of sex workers where you could plug in what you want, this color hair, this particular activity, this particular area of the city or country, and bam, here's your results. It's actually, I will give it to him, it's pretty smart. but what happened is he made so much money and got so much power over the industry, certainly in America and pretty much in the world before they took him down, that he became a bit corrupt, and he wanted to use his power to get sex with whoever he wanted, to get drugs, to get guns, to get obedience. He was a thug. Um, and unfortunately, he wanted control over me. I'm not sure why. There was millions of us, and I made the grand mistake of telling him to go fuck himself when he tried to do that, which, because I'm a little feisty, I don't like to be controlled. And I didn't realize that people like that, he called sex workers inventory, the women. He said, "You're don't mess with my inventory." because I had also told a couple of colleagues that they didn't need to go sleep with him whenever he called, because they were. And he was just abusing his power. He was just a kingpin, like happens in crime or in regular business. Um, and he was collecting guns and drugs. He was a nightmare of a person. And it's just bad luck that he was focused on me and that he reacted so badly when I told him to go to hell. What if I could do it over again? Obviously, I would have just ignored him and hoping that he forgot about me. But I was too feisty, too too loudmouth. Um, And that made him mad, right? That made him mad. They in the street in America, they pimps call a woman who won't obey pimps and give her money, they call her a renegade. When she's on the street and she won't get in line and pay a pimp and be controlled, she's a renegade. So I suppose I was a renegade in the virtual online world. I wouldn't What he wanted was for me to sell sex, which first of all I can't do, that's illegal. But I would sell sex, and then clients would write reviews for this site, and that he would charge memberships and make money. And he offered me a deal where if I did that, he would add other really good reviews that he said would help me. And he would, if I ever got a bad one, he would take it down and that would help me. And I'm sure people did that with him, but I was not one to I didn't want to be part of any of this garbage. And
Yeah.
and certainly it included coming over to his house and doing whatever he wanted physically, which I was definitely not gonna do. Um, so yes, pimp, I mean, I don't know, I don't have a better word for somebody who thinks that women are products and property to sell and trade, but whatever you would call that is what he was.
No, I mean, when you look at the outcome, he seems to fit the bill perfectly.
There are people that run, I mean, I know in Australia, I know a couple of brothel owners and they're totally normal business people, at least from what I know and hear about. I've never worked there, but Um, so I'm well aware that not all managers are like that at all. Some are totally great and normal and just running a business and trying to do good and make a little money. But this person was not a good person.
Yeah.
But he's out of
So,
prison and apparently he's cleaned up his life and gotten sober, which is good.
okay. And but he still runs this site that you're aware of.
Well, he's changed his name. Victim Services tells me where he is, and he uses a different last name now to try to move on. He has a daughter, but he is a part owner in a company called Treehouse Park, which is in the Grand Cayman, which is an offshore financial shelter for the money that owns the Erotic Review. And they've sold off pieces of it to Eastern European stuff. But I mean, it's shell after shell after shell of offshore companies. The same deal.
Which, yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's oil, sex work, or anything. They're all bloody good at hiding their money.
I mean, right? I mean, right?
How do you think OnlyFans has changed the industry?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So me myself, I have an OnlyFans, but I just use it as another social media. There's nothing on there that's not on Twitter or Instagram. So I actually don't know why anybody's ever given me a dime on there. A few people have. I don't make a lot, but I actually don't know why they ever paid because they could just see it all for free on Instagram. So that said, some women are on there, and my understanding is the ones who make a lot of money, it's actually connection and attention that they're selling, just like in every other business. It's always attention. And good for them. I think it's kept a lot of women safer. They can stay home and make money instead of going anywhere and meeting anybody in person. I think because it's on the internet, it slants success toward the physical beauty, right? Because it's a visual medium. In the way that strip clubs or porn, it's very much about how pretty you are. Where a lot of like companions and professional cuddlers and dominatrixes and people who are in person, yeah, they're usually decent looking, but actually you'd be surprised it's not the most beautiful who always do the best. Because in person, there's a lot of like charisma and chemistry. Again, you probably can't be ugly, but it's not just a picture or video. So a lot of other things come into play. Like in high-end escorting, I made a lot of money because I'm a very, very good skier. I grew up skiing. I can ski anything. And rich guys were like, oh my God, I can take you skiing. You can ski anything on this mountain. And you're a great hang après ski at the restaurant, right? Or the bar.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't matter on OnlyFans. Who gives a shit if you're a good skier? But, like, I know a lot of high-end companions that are really good. They golf really well because guys are like, "Oh, I can take you on my golf vacation, and I can spend a week with a hot chick too," right? So, I think it's a different skill set on the OnlyFans than companionship. However, I do know dozens of women who've quit in-person companionship to do OnlyFans. They tend to be the younger and or more beautiful, um, but some of it's working out great for. And of course, the leeches have come, the managers that wanna take too much of your money, the Andrew Tates of the world with what he and his brother ran that My Free Cams, and they scam the women. Um, and I must get 100 of those a day from OnlyFans managers, and they're leeches. However, I'm sure some of them are good and do work that maybe the models don't wanna have to do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, geez, there's some insane money going around on that platform. I think that someone recently came out and said they earn 50 million a year. I think was it one of the Hadid sisters earned over $1 million in 24 hours.
sure. I mean, people want direct access to celebrities. I know some Sarah Silverman is on there just doing comedy. She's not doing anything sexual. It's just another platform for her. Um,
Well, I believe that's
so
what it was originally intended for, is like a behind the scenes or an intimate type of subscriber only version of this person. And it wasn't
right?
brought out for sex work. But then, of course, like COVID happened and lockdowns and things, find a way to happen.
Yeah, I mean, OFTV that I think they're still working on expanding their streaming is like Twitch or Discord or anything. I mean, some people are just captivating on the screen and they get big followings, whether on all sorts of platforms. And I honestly think if the OnlyFans managers are doing good work and helping the stars, then that's just as normal as a Hollywood agent and just as legitimate. But Hollywood agents typically took 10%, give or take. They weren't taking half, right? So
Yeah. I,
it's a
and
matter.
I
These are
believe
labor issues.
OnlyFans takes about 20% or something. So they're, as a business, I can't imagine what their turnover is. But
Oh,
I know from what I've read is that it is a full-time job. These, as you said, connection. It's that connecting people. Photos will only get you so far, but these people are often spending 12 hours a day online, not shooting porno, not shooting naked photos. They are talking to people, and
yeah.
that's where they're making their money. They're doing the work.
Yeah, and the good ones, I mean, so the temptation accord, they call them chatters. What a lot of them wanna do is hire other people to do the chatting. Now, of course, it's hard to find somebody who can be as authentic as the real model, but those overseas, usually chatters are getting better at it every month. Um, and of course, the end result that a lot of people would like is for the model to simply be AI so that you could have unlimited content, unlimited models, and then the chatters could be anybody because you wouldn't need the model. So that's just simply that you could scale it, right? Because the problem, of course, for all models is that there's one of us. Like for me, I get yelled at online because men want me to answer my email. Well, I can't. I have an autoresponder because I can't answer 10,000 people a day. And that's just me. I can't. I have to prioritize attention. So obviously the scalability is the goal and all that stuff. And if somebody can master that, they'll get very, very rich. But the problem, of course, is that the chatters, they just haven't mastered how to act like a hot young model from London yet, right? But they might.
Yeah, but it won't be
Look,
long. That won't be long. I
I did a
reckon within
podcast.
a few years.
Yeah, I did a podcast with somebody a month ago, and he was a young guy, and he said, honestly, a lot of guys my age don't want to put up with real women anymore when in a video game we can create an AI woman who is nicer to us and does whatever we want. And of course, my response was, well, it's not a real person. But then I thought about vibrators. I mean, it's not a man. And yes, I joke. Some vibrators are very sad when you'd actually want a man to snuggle with, but they have their purpose. So I
Absolutely.
I don't want to see a world in which we don't pay attention to each other, but maybe the old ways in which look, women wanted money, men wanted sex. Maybe this is why we invented marriage because maybe it all goes full circle back to what ancient societies figured out is that if you wrap it up in the blanket of love, it's just better and everybody gets what they want.
Well, I mean, there's dowries,
Yeah.
there's arranged marriages, so that even the very nature of marriage has been evolving for a very, very long time.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we we're so independent minded nowadays and inventing more ways to not need each other. I don't know what the end game of all that is. If we totally don't need each other, that could be a problem, right? Because, you
Absolutely.
know, we shelve away our elderly, we put our kids in boarding schools, no one needs anyone anymore. Men don't need women. If they've got an AI model, women don't need men. I'm this is of course hyperbole, folks. Um, that probably isn't a world that's good. Then we'll just all be very isolated and lonely. It's good to need each other, but I have faith. I mean, look, I have seen billionaires who could have any model hot chick they wanted, and they still wanted love. And a lot of them they didn't always go for the hottest. They went for somebody who loved them, even though they could buy. I mean, there's still something magical in real connection that I don't think you can buy. I don't think you can AI. I I don't think you can monetize it. I've had offers of all kinds of stuff, and if I just didn't feel it, I didn't feel it. And I think so have men, right? What do they say? No
Yeah.
matter how hot she is, somebody's tired of fucking her.
Yep. Somebody's tired of the shit. Yep.
I mean, right?
And
We
there's no
all
such
know.
thing as a perfect marriage or a perfect companionship. It is literally when two human beings get together. That if you don't, I think if you don't have any sort of conflict, if you don't have any type of difference of opinions, then that would be boring as shit too.
Why do you think some people like to share their life with a person like you guys have each other? And in spite of the fact that there will be disagreement, that's life. Do you think some people just want to share their life with somebody and others want it on demand? Or do you think they've been hurt and they're not ready to trust again? Or why do you think?
Well, I think there's a combination of lots of things. It's what you've witnessed growing up as well. My parents are still together after they're nearly 55 years now, and they used to bicker. They used to annoy the shit out of each other, and we used to get annoyed with them bickering. But at the same time, it taught you that you don't. I never heard them say a really angry, horrible word to each other. They never called each other names, and that's the one thing me and my wife we pride ourselves on is we fight well, we fight healthy. You know, we don't use any of our weaknesses against each other. We don't betray our trust in each other by using words in hatred or to undermine the base. And I think depending on how you were brought up or what you were witnessing determines how you fight. And
Mm,
when you fight ugly, it's really hard to have a healthy relationship despite the fighting.
sure. Yeah, they say don't use the D word. Because once you can say, I'm really mad at you right now, but I'm not leaving, right? I'm just really mad at you right now. Yeah,
Yep.
in high end escorting, I tried to avoid them. And for the most part I did, but uh, once or twice over the years, I met people. I'm thinking of one in particular who preferred things with no emotional connection. And if he said if he felt any kind of connection, he was on to the next relationship. And I hate to be so judgmental, but I wondered like who hurt him because I think he was avoiding what's really the magic. And I'm sure he had his reasons. I never did find out why. It wasn't my place. But I remember thinking how odd that you want it empty. Like,
Yeah, and that's the juxtaposition of human emotions that if you want love, you've got to expose yourself to hurt or pain.
the worst, right? And dumped. Oh my god, it's a great diet. You always lose weight. But oh, the work. I just ended something with somebody about a year and a half ago, and he's doing great. I'm actually happy for him and also a little jealous because I'm human. But it's an odd feeling, but I am really happy, and his life is better this way, and I know it is. It's fine. But I'm jealous. But, it was so bad. Like, I look back at these texts I sent, and I seem crazy. I was like, "Oh god." It's fine. I'm still glad after all the things I've done that I can still feel. And most women and men in my world do go on to be wives and husbands and have relationships. I hope in my old lady years that I have love, whatever that looks like. I don't think it needs to be marriage. I'm not gonna have kids at this age, but it will be quite a task for some man to take on what I've done. He's gonna either have to be retired or self-employed or not care about stigma. But I have seen dozens of women in my world find love afterwards with some brave man who's willing to stand up and say, "Look, she's retired. It's in the past." It definitely narrows the pool, but I don't think it makes it 0. We'll
Yeah.
see. But I mean, I think there's and if that doesn't work out, then I'll just have lots of little old lady friends and dogs, and that'll just have to be fine too. I mean, my
I've always had the sort of thought that if you have an ongoing sexual relationship with somebody and companionship and good times, it's the human nature is to fall for this person. How do you separate that? Have you made conscious efforts to separate that?
well, so in my relationships in this dynamic, there's the fact the matter is when someone else gets to decide when you see each other because they're the boss, they're paying you. It keeps it in this box of like that you're serving them because you don't get to call them and say, "We're going to go to Hawaii this week," because you're not the boss, they are. And they don't have to call you ever again each time. So it's not really a real relationship, although they typically do rebook you, but they retain the power of being the employer, technically, right? Even though they're very nice to you and it's very personal, there's still a power difference that sort of I've had great affection for clients, but it remains in that box by nature of the fact that I don't have equal power. I'm the service provider. Or whatever power I have is not uh somebody else's the customer, so to speak. So it and then also while most wealthy men are very polished, they have nice teeth and hair and stuff because they got money. Some of them were much more polished than I am because they're rich. They often are not my physical type, right? They chose me based on they like my type, but the reverse was not true. I chose them based on how they treat me and they're the right choice, but I didn't choose them because I thought they were hot. So they physical chemistry is often lopsided, right? I never served anybody I thought was hideous. I didn't have to, luckily, but they may not have been exactly what I would have chosen. Although I never really cared, even in my regular relationships, I'm not that interested in what a guy looks like. I'm interested in how he treats me. I've dated tall, short, fat, thin, different races. I don't care. I care how he treats me. Um, th- and then like geography, like I mean, one of the people is 3,000 miles away. I'm not going to live there. He's not going to live here. So it is what it is, right? Every time I
Yeah,
see him, which is every month, it's lovely, but I always assume that could be the last time and that would be his choice, which I have to be okay with, right? I can't go nuts. I'm not the wife. So I have felt emotions, but it stays in the box because I know my place. It's important to remember not it can be disappointing. Sometimes they'll do things like lie and tell you you're the only person that they see. Typically that's not true. Why do they say it? I think they're just trying to be nice. But we have databases that are back channel private stuff where we can see that that is not true. And it's fine. I'm like a restaurant. They don't have to go to the same restaurant every month. But if I were to develop overly strong feelings, it would probably be a source of disappointment. And that wouldn't be healthy for me to mix it too much. It's important to remain professional, right? It's a
absolutely.
profession where you're expected. Well, it's a profession where you're expected to act unprofessional because you're acting like the girlfriend, but behind the scenes, it is actually you're pretty professional,
Yeah.
just
Um,
not during the appointment.
where, so most of your clients would be, we'd call them, let's just say, wealthy. How fallible do you find these people? Like, is there a massive front that's put up?
Like, what, with me or in their life or
Oh, yeah, in their life, like, is there a difference? A lot of these people come across as very, they are rich, they are powerful, they have a lot of people serving them. What do you find? Do you find that they don't treat you as an object, so to speak, and they actually open up and you get to see the person?
yeah, sometimes not. I mean, they know they get better service out of you if they're gentlemen, and most rich people have really good manners because 'cause they're socialized to do so. So, if they don't like you, they're just very sweet to you, and then they never call you again. I was lucky that that didn't happen to me too often, but it did. Like, I used to see this one guy, and he moved to Europe, and he was like, I love you, but I'm not gonna fly you to Europe all the time. It's too far." And at the time, I lived in California, so it was literally the other side of the planet. And then he moved back to the US, and I thought we'd rekindle, and he, decided to see one of my colleagues instead, so I realized it wasn't just location, he was just done dating me. We had had a nice couple years, and that was it. He liked
Mm.
variety more than he liked me. Would I have liked that he returned to me? Of course, but he's the boss, not me. In terms of their reality, so a lot of them so rich people are very private. I've had every single one of them has said, "Please don't ever say anything about me on your podcast." On these shows I do, and I find that very funny that they're that narcissistic that they think anybody's watching these to try to figure out who they've been, because no one cares. But they're worried about, and it can be dangerous to be very wealthy, especially if there are things like offshoring or tax sheltering or, I have known people who've committed fraud. 2 of them got caught and are one served a sentence and one still will. I didn't know, but, the ones who are honest, they often bend rules but don't break. But, these are usually very smart in fact, every single time, very smart men. They know the rules of the game and they bend them. But they're usually yeah, and the boldness of, like a lot of them, they have staff of women in their various companies, so, like, being seen with a woman is no big deal because nobody knows what it could be. You could be one of their marketing people or anything, right? So it's not that they're worried, and you'd be surprised, they may hire, like, the 19-year-old, 6-foot-tall Russian blonde model in private, but the people they run around with, like, at the FBO and on the jet, they you wouldn't even know it's a companion. It looks like a lawyer and maybe slightly too good looking, because they know good and goddamn well that their status is their ticket and to not mess that up, right? That
Yeah.
said, yes, a lot of people serve them, and people are paid to shut the fuck up, like, they're drivers, they're pilots, they don't say anything, and they all know. Cartier and Rolex have a list of all the women they've bought stuff for, and often they walk in and say, "Send one to this address, send the same one to that address, send a third one to that address," because then their Christmas shopping for the year is done for all their women, and Cartier knows to shut up. So,
Yeah.
but they also don't know what it is. They don't know if one is a business connection or a cousin or a coworker or neighbor. They don't care. They don't care. Hotels, they're quiet. These men tend to have homes all over the place. So, uh, yeah, in terms of who they present versus who they also go in phases. I've met men that are going through a divorce and they're in a pretty miserable place, but these wealthy divorces can take 2, 3, 4 years to settle out. So they're single, but they're not single. They got kids. They don't want to get involved with some woman who wants to be the next wife, but they want to date. So they'll go to a companion because they know that we don't have the right to demand marriage. We don't have the right to try to get in there. Although it does happen, that's typically not the rules of the game. Um,
Yeah.
I've met men who, we often serve men who are like, they've come over to America for school or for work. And culturally, They don't totally relate to women here, so they can't date as easily. Um, I served for years a veteran who had been blown up in a landmine and had no legs and one arm and had no access to dating. Should he go without connection and intimacy for his whole life? I don't think so. I was proud to serve him, and we still remain friendly. He found love and moved to another country, and he's great, and I really enjoyed getting to know him, but he had because of his physicality, he had no access to a woman, but he still had the same drive as any other human red-blooded male. Um, so it's all manner of things. Uh,
What
the
what about
why
the what about the negative side of the rich people or the rich lifestyle where they're not used to hearing the word no?
Yeah, I served a billionaire for a few years, and I was younger and just more disorganized as you are when you're young, and I would be late in Los Angeles traffic where I lived in those years. And he finally, like the 3rd or 4th time, he's like, "Do you know who I am?" And I got mad. I was like, "Yes, I know. You're you and I'm nobody." And he said, You can't make me wait for like 2 hours to see you when we have plans." And he was correct. I was being rude and disorganized and stupid. And I don't know what I was doing. I think it might have been passive aggressive because he was a little bit of a shit sometimes. Uh, he would be a little bit of a shit about payment, and it made me so angry because he was a billionaire and I was a graduate student. I was so broke and it was nothing to him. A measly few $1,000 to him versus how much I needed it. And he would make me beg for it, and he would joke at the end of appointments of like, "You're not gonna see me for free, you don't really like me," and he would do it every time. So, I think maybe I was passive aggressively being late on purpose, but it didn't register consciously. Whatever I was doing, where I knew I wasn't getting ready on time and I knew I would be late. I think I just didn't really like him, so whatever. But I needed the money. I was broke. And when he finally said that, he said, "Okay, this is the last time I'm gonna see you." And it was. He never spoke to me again. And it affected me because it was a loss of income.
Yeah,
And hey, he didn't give a shit. He's a billionaire. There's a million of me, right? I'm
yeah,
nobody, literally nobody to him. So yes, there was but I had earned that by making a billionaire wait not just 15, 20 minutes, but like 2 or 3 hours. I don't know why I
yeah.
did.
And for them, in their busy lifestyle, that can be a huge deal.
Anybody who does that. I mean, it's unprofessional of me. It was unprofessional of me, and I think looking back, I didn't wanna dump him because I needed income, and I didn't know if I would get another client, and of course you always do. I shoulda just dumped him, but I didn't have the guts. I don't know. Who knows what was going on in my head? Um, yeah, they're not used to hearing the word "no" as much, but they also, uh, at least the ones I knew, always very much had their lives together. Like, when they made plans, they didn't really flake. They aren't late. They they have and it's easy to have your life together when you have that much help, right? Because you have money. But things like little things, like they don't do drugs, they don't go drinking and having a headache because they have shit to do the next morning. They brush and floss twice a day. They tend to be very controlled, measured people. That's how they got the lives they have. Although some just inherited it. But the ones who were self-made, they're where they are for a reason. They're not fuck ups and they don't tolerate anybody else around them being a fuck up. I think a lot of them have like this anathema to anybody who's a mess. They don't want to be around it. Now, yes, they're snobs. They like the best of everything. Sometimes I wish they could. I once took somebody worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Starbucks because he had never been to one. Because he had chefs and people. He never went out in the public. When he went out in public, he usually had to have security because of the nature of his job. It was well-known CEO, major company, um, and a controversial company. And we were in a different city, and I made him go get a caramel apple cider, which they're quite good in the cold months. And he was horrified at first, like this public paper cup thing. And I had him take a sip, and he was like, "This is so good." I said, "See?" And then I made him go ice skating at a public rink with the rental boots. I was pretty sure he was gonna dump me, but I didn't care. Uh, and he had so much fun. There was hardly anybody there, uh, and I think he was horrified to rent a pair of boots, but he had socks on, it's fine. He wasn't gonna catch any fungus from the commoners. And, I think, he called me delightfully alive, and I don't think it was entirely a compliment. But, I think sometimes they like to dip their toe in the pool of common filth like me. Maybe that's why they hire us. There is some enjoyment for them to show us stuff we can't afford, which is why a lot of them like you to be younger because you've never been anywhere yet, you've never done anything. It's not very fun for them to hire somebody who's 48 like me and who has been everywhere now. Like, it's they yeah, if you tell them you've already been to that hotel with some other guy, they hate it, of course. So you usually lie, right? But, and that's normal. No guy wants to take you somewhere some other guy already took you. That's fine. But I think they do wanna show you their world because they can, but I think there's a degree to which they also wanna be reminded of what the world was like when they were back in college, before they were rich, when maybe they married the first wife for love, before all the money made them get divorced and hate each other, before they cheated on her because 100 women a day threw themselves at them because they got rich and all the complicated things that came along with. I'm not excusing their luxurious lives but I think sometimes they enjoy stepping back to where they were, maybe? But I
Yep.
guess you'd have to ask them for sure.
um, how do you deal with trauma? So
Mm,
you've had obviously, you had somebody try to take your life. You've
yeah,
had the trauma of how the family reacted, and I don't care who you are. That's traumatic if you're close, and then all of a sudden you get cut off. How
yeah.
have you dealt with that, and what have you learnt from that?
My therapist makes a lot of money off me. Yeah, the 2 years when my family didn't speak to me were rough. I just flew. I was in Arizona. I just flew all the time. I was adding those bunch of tickets, different ratings and stuff. And it was also the Great Recession, so, like, everybody was broke too, which was weird, a weird time. Um, and, yeah, when David Elms tried to kill me, yeah, I didn't sleep very well for a long time. I went and bought a firearm, got trained, got a concealed carry permit. I know the statistic. My lawyer was like, he's very anti-gun. He was like, you're 9 times more likely to get killed by your own gun. I know all the statistics, but I couldn't sleep at night and it was something I could do. And hey, target practice is fun. So I did that, which, perhaps was stupid, but it was something. Um, when, you know, yeah, there was, I don't know if it was official PTSD, but it probably is something like that. I'm a fairly anxious New York type anyway, but I'm not, nobody would ever call me like super calm. Um, but I relived it a lot in my head, like you with the stuff you saw. Had nightmares for a long time. I like knowing that the victim services in Arizona tells me where he is, and I haven't looked it up in a couple years, but I used to monitor his address, and it made me feel comfortable to know where he was, and that I'm nowhere near there. He's left me alone. Apparently he's cleaned up his life, and that gives me faith that he will not do anything to me again. I had a Russian client at the time from San Diego who was like, "Well, he's in prison, so now we have him killed." I was like, "No, Sam. No, we don't." And Sam was like, "Well, you're stupid." I said, "This is not Moscow. This is not what we're doing. Even if this is not who I am. I don't do things like that to people, even if I could get away with it." And Sam was like, "You're an idiot because he's going to kill you." And he never did. And I guess that's good for me. I like being here for now. Um, but yeah, I exercise a lot. I spent hours today at the Pier 57 with my dog in the sunshine. Uh, like you noticed, I'm a chatty bitch. I'm an extrovert, so I like people, but I get afraid a little too easily. Um, especially if they physically come at me, so I have to be careful. Like If anything's weird on the subway in New York, I just go and get in the next car. And I try to remember that I might get scared more easily than is justified by reality. I try to remember some of that is and build in structures. And the people, my neighbors and family who know me and know about the David Elms debacle, they they know that some of my mental health issues are a result of that, and they give me, grace with the little bit of anxiety or whatever it triggers. Exercise helps a lot. Yoga, breathing. I drink too much coffee still. I'd probably be calmer if I didn't, but I like it. And I know that I feel good when I connect with other people who've seen some shit and been through some shit. And every time somebody is kind to me, it's another little tiny brick in the wall that shows me that most people are good, because I really believe that's true. And I actually believe David Elms, if he hadn't been addled out on crack cocaine, would not have done what he did, I think. I hope. So, one day at a time, like all of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And but the therapy is important. No, that's awesome. So what do you do now? What is a day in the life of Amy Taylor right now?
Well, as this gets toward its sunset, I still see two people that I've been seeing for almost 18 years and 16 years. So very casual. I pop off to Florida and California, and the rest of the time I'm just home. I get a lot of brand deals. I still model, still fly. I'm adding my rotorcraft rating, which is hard. And I hope it'll take me a couple of years if I can even pass it all. It's a lot harder than fixed wing. I go visit my family a lot. I'm gonna have to move back to California because my parents are getting older. So that'll be within 5 years. I'll I'll leave New York, but I'm really enjoying Gotham City for now. I always wanted to live here and try and be a New Yorker for a little while. And it's a dream that I get to check this experience off my bucket list. Because New York City it's so fucking fun. It's so fun. It's not bucolic. It's not mellow. Maybe it's good for my anxiety and PTSD because it's the only thing more neurotic than me is New York City.
Yeah.
Uh, but that this chapter here will end. I'll go back to California where my family is. Um, and I wanna tell my story. I understand a lot of people think I'm a garbage person. That's their right to think what they want, but I think I wanna humanize it because there's so much trauma happening to sex workers, especially the ones who aren't as privileged as I was in spite of what happened with David Elms. The rest of it was very privileged, and most people don't get that lucky. And most therapy people and social worker won't even deal with them. They won't help them. Just like there's not any financial advisors or there's very few CPAs. There's nobody who will rent to them. Like no systems and structures around. And yet CDC estimates there's 1 million women in the US alone engaged in some form of sex work. So that's a lot of people. It's one out of every 125 women in just my country. So I would like the days in my life as I sunset out, which is happening, to if I could leave my little corner of the world even a tiny bit better. And I don't know that I'll be able to, but they need things like allied healthcare that's willing, if you in America, if you tell your healthcare provider you're a sex worker, you lose your insurance. And that shouldn't be. In Belgium,
No,
they
I
just
mean, yeah,
so
over here we're lucky we have universal healthcare, and then you can have your private if you want it. But ultimately, the money talks. What you do for a living is completely irrelevant.
really.
Yep,
No.
it's completely irrelevant. And what kind of amazes me about the lack of um, help or support or even professional services for sex workers is it's becoming a real money maker. I mean, it's always been a money maker on to the wrong side. So not the people actually
Yes.
giving the services, but
Yeah.
now it's becoming a real money maker for the people doing those services. So for the women and men involved in the actual, for want of a better term, and they're rich.
Hmm.
Well, everyone, obviously, and there is drugs, there is negative stigma, but there is, OnlyFans is making people rich.
Well, and we don't have the right to consume the products of people's labor. I listened to your stuff about, we consume the products of like first responder labor, EMTs, cops, firemen. I mean, Phoenix police saved my life with David Elms. I would be dead without the Phoenix PD, despite that they were not thrilled with my choice of job. Trust me, we talked with my lawyers. They were like, "Oh God, another one of these ladies." But they knew that that doesn't mean I should die at the hands of a creepy pimp. So they had to chase down some crackhead and get him. They had to wrestle this dude to the ground, and they these guys in Manhattan, NYPD can't even afford to live on Manhattan. They can't afford to live where they serve us. They have to live on Staten Island. Honestly, they probably like it better out there away from the nonsense, but we don't pay them enough to even live here. And yet they do the job. So to your point, they don't have the right to consume first responder labor and not provide for their mental health when they see the stuff that none of us want to have to see. Child abuse, death, mayhem, all the stuff you saw, right? That doctor I dated when I was in college was an ER doctor. And I remember once seeing a burn victim in the ER when I went to Candy Stripe and see what he did. And I remember that man. He had smoked, fallen asleep, and he held out his hand and said, "Help me." And he could barely speak because he was burnt and he didn't make it. And I remember him. And the doctor that I was dating saw that every other night. And he had health care, and mental health care, but others do not, right? And
Yep.
in my work, because they don't legitimize the work, but yet people love the products of the labor, they're driven out of mental health resources and banking and housing. Well, fine, but you don't get to consume people and then not stand by them if they're part of the fabric of society. And I
Yep.
understand it's complex and a stigmatized profession, but we've done it in America with stripping, which we also sort of don't like, and it's full of problems. Or OnlyFans. It's, like it or not, it's legal. Maybe not the best job. Would I want my niece doing it? Probably not. But I don't want her destroyed by society if she chooses to, you know?
Yeah, I think in conversations with friends, colleagues over many years, I think from a male perspective, it is getting less stigmatized or less judgmental if a woman does do this type of work.
Okay.
Um, Essentially, we don't care. Oh,
Well, thanks.
I'm speaking for me, but yeah, we don't care.
You also have chapters. The same chick who was like wild in her 20s you're not the same person in your 40s. Like most people that did companionship are not like me. They're not lifers. Most of them do it for like 6 months tops to pay off a bill and then they go do other things. That's like 99% of them. So like you're going to judge somebody because of something they essentially did for one long summer? I mean, come on. And we can change, right? And I really believe people can change and that has to be okay. And stigma contributes to really poor mental health outcomes. They've done studies of, for instance, brothel workers have much better psychological outcomes because in my country, their work is legal, so they don't have to live in fear every single day. It's still stigmatized for sure, but it's legal. They get medical checks, there's security, there's cameras, the clients can't fuck around as much. It's way better. It's way better. And therefore they suffer a lot less mentally and physically. Um, but I don't it could be like that, but I think you can't spite and punish your way into a utopian world. You have to reckon with what is. And it doesn't
Yeah,
mean you don't
and
doesn't mean you don't guide people into like better behaviors that society wants, but it also doesn't mean you spite and punish people forever for something that I don't know. At least that's what I believe. I think
I
kindness
think
is
it's a different world as well now. Whereas, when you and I were in our 20s, Facebook wasn't around, social media wasn't around. So, and I guess if the ability is there to earn not just a quick buck, but a lot of quick bucks, if you are that way inclined, you know, do you want to go and work in a coffee shop, or are you going to go do something like that if it comes to the choice of being homeless? So I think there's a lot less, the amount of money that's been thrown around in that type of sphere. But I think the difference is it's now permanent. Even if you dabbled in prostitution as a young person and managed to get out 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, no one might know. Whereas now it's going to be on the internet forever.
Yeah. Porn, which I think OnlyFans is probably more aligned with like doing porn because it's visual and it's on the internet forever. Although, as we talked about, not everyone is really doing porn on there. And what is porn? Like, if it's just solo in lingerie, they call that pretty girl in porn versus actual intercourse or just toys or, there's degrees of porn. But I mean, yeah, like a friend of mine was doing this Findom where you're these men, they're called cash masters and they're just mean to other people online and people send them money. I was like, wait a minute, like it's like a male dominatrix. I think most of their customers are other men, but maybe they're women. I don't even know who their customers are. And literally, they're just mean to them and people send them money. I was like, wait, like most people would do that for free. But um, they're usually good looking. But I mean, again, it's attention. I think you can monetize attention. And now with the whole world being your customer, there's no barrier to distribution, right? Like these
Yeah.
podcasts that get huge and then they monetize them with ads. It's just because the distribution is so big. It dwarfs Hollywood or Bollywood. I mean, it's just the distribution numbers are so big. So that's how the money gets big, right? When you got 4 billion customers, it's a big business.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you look at who's the number one? Joe Rogan. He's getting 16 million streams per day.
Yeah. I mean, it takes time and he was kind of first to market, so that helps. But
Yeah.
some of these young kids on like Twitch and Discord, I find as a woman in her 40s, I've never heard of them, but they're massive. Like, and yeah, some people just have charisma. Like they just or they do one thing that goes viral and can they make it stick and can it last or not? I think sometimes it's the bravery thing. It takes talking about the things nobody else was willing to talk about. Um
Yeah.
Some of them are, I think they're monetizing rage. I don't love that. Like, but they probably just trying to pay bills too. So
Yeah, and that's it. Most of them don't start up rich. They just manage to find a niche, whatever that niche is, and then the more you fine tune that niche, the more dedicated your fans become, the more money you earn, and if we didn't consume it, they wouldn't exist.
right, right. I mean, the people like I find when I'm scrolling, like some people out there are really funny, and they're just natural. Like I can't believe there's no more gatekeepers. There's no more like agencies that decide who we watch anymore. It's very democratized. Again, I don't love the rage bait podcast because I think rage is the only thing that sells better on the internet than sex is rage. And I would argue that rage is more harmful to society. Fighting, but again, I mean, once these shows get big enough to like ask for the live chat, the super chat stuff, and people are calling in and paying $100 to like talk to the guest or make fun of the guest or argue with the guest. I mean, I cannot fault anybody for doing that model. We used to have the old call-in shows when it's the same thing, right? And fine. You know what? As long as I think there's no FCC delays in terms of like obscenity but they'll figure all that out on the internet. There's, as long as I
Yeah.
think most of the big like YouTube and stuff, as long as you're not talking about like unaliving yourself or grape or things that are too far over or child stuff, then I think you're fine, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
What bugs me
And we
about my
have a
brain,
way. We always find a way to consume the things we want to see. And before the internet, it was the telephone sex stuff.
sure,
So
900.
there's
Remember
always
that?
been ways of sort of monetizing this sort of thing anyway. It's
Yeah.
how we as a society, we can't consume things, and it's not just one person doing it. There are millions of people doing it. We can't consume things and then pretend that thing doesn't exist.
Yes, I agree. That's not fair and it's selfish. I would argue though, what bugs me about my brand is not for kids. It is not for children. And when I'm on platforms that do nothing to stop, they're the ones writing the code. If they own the app or the website, it's their code, not mine. I don't want Amy Taylor to show up if the person surfing it is 16 or 15 or whatever the age is in whatever country. That's on them to write that code in. They can do it. And and it
So
really bugs.
on that, Australia has just passed the laws, and we're the first country in the world where social media is banned for anyone under the age of 16.
Wow, I didn't hear that. That's fantastic. Good.
Yeah, they were passed last week, and I think it actually gets enacted in 26, I believe.
Okay.
So it takes a year because they've put it on the companies themselves. They're the ones that have to work out how to do that. And it cannot involve a digital ID for the people that do go on.
Well, device-based is good. They'll figure, you know what? If they want the big bucks, figure it out. And good. I mean, there will be kids who get a phone and nothing's ever perfect. But what bugs me though is I get on Instagram 16-year-old girls saying they see my posts and I'm trying to be positive, but I'm not always posting the bad stuff. I'm posting the good stuff because I can't win. If I post the bad stuff, I get called a tragedy and a victim. And if I post the good stuff, then I'm a Jezebel who's spoiled. I can't win. But then I get these young girls who are like, I want to live like you. And that is not good. They're too young. They don't understand the full story. I would not recommend this, even if they survive it like I sort of have. It's still a dumb choice. They should learn tech and get a regular job. It's easier and better. They should not choose this. But these sites are not doing enough to protect. And the problem, I suppose we have some culpability and we post these fancy social media feeds and they think it's all that glitters is gold, which is not the case. I think about that a lot is what culpability do I have in making the young think that they should choose what I've chosen, which I do not think they should. Uh, But yeah, this is a good solution. Australia is just simply if you're just too young and impressionable, you shouldn't even see it. 'Cause you're not ready
Yeah.
for it, right?
And the problem is with at the moment it relies on parents to say they can't have an app. It's such a one of those things that
Very
goes
hard.
around. If 15 of my friends have this and I don't, I'm missing out. So if everyone doesn't have it in that age group, then that I can't see it. And I, apart from the people that think it's an overreach, the vast majority of people support it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that you want to be careful anytime you restrict anything because freedom is, of course, very important. But at what cost? Yeah, I mean, would it be great if there was like a separate internet for adults? Sure, but that's not what we built. It maybe but this has to be worked out. The internet's been kind of a wild west for its initial 30 years that it's been extant. And I know we passed that CDA 230 in America. Bill Clinton passed that famous law that said that internet sites were not responsible for the content that they post if it was UGC, user generated content, because they couldn't afford the compliance of a million users on Reddit or the old MySpace and all that. And that makes sense because the compliance is too expensive. They couldn't do it. And the internet would not have grown. And they wanted it to grow into this thing that it's become, which has been a miracle. But maybe now that it's more mature at 30 years in, it's time for something like, FCC controls and obscenity laws and all the things that were applicable to television, right? There were rules about what you could put on TV. Um, and if not the websites, then who, right? I mean,
Yeah. And
the
the
device.
irony about this social media ban is that there's still no impetus on like Pornhub to do the same.
Well, yeah, Pornhub, I think 18 states in America have said Pornhub has to age verify. And instead, Pornhub has simply not available in those states. If you're logging in from those states, you can't get to the site. Now, you could just use a VPN, right? 'Cause
Exactly.
Pornhub's, and most of them age verify with a one button click that says, yes, I'm 18, which is nonsense. Um,
Yeah.
Some people talk about device-based verification. Now, I'm no techie, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But they say the devices could be like you would own your phone or your computer and it would know how old you are. Every time you buy one, it would be device-based, that it wouldn't be able to access stuff because it would know the device belongs to. But I don't know how that would work with logging in over I don't know. Um, but
I don't
anyway,
know, and yeah, and
no.
that's a tough road to go down to because yeah, there's the whole they'll know all our information. I mean, they know all our bloody information as it is.
Yeah, I know. Hi, FBI agent watching this. Like, well, the great thing is that free speech is one of the ultimate laws, and you have the right to talk about your story, even if it's a salacious one. You know, that's why former mafia members can talk about what they did as long as it's statute of limitations and all that. But yeah, I think young people are too impressionable to see. You're just not ready to see all the nuances of the adult world and all of its glory.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, look, I don't. I think it's a good start. Getting rid of social media for under 16 is a positive thing. I would like them to introduce it to other type of sites like porn sites. But yeah, that's a complicated road to go down.
I think more of the US is going to age verify porn. So my sister works in politics, and she said a federal law was coming in this country to force them to age verify. The My understanding is, though, how do you force sites from other countries to comply because they are not subject to your laws? They're not here.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you block, like, I've been to China a few times and you can't get to Google when you're in China. So I don't know if, like, I want to just watch Sean McAuliffe on my Netflix and I can't because I don't live in Australia. It makes me very angry. I love Sean McAuliffe and I can't no, sorry, YouTube. It's geo blocked and it frustrates me
Yeah.
because come on, US, let me
Yeah,
watch.
and there's ways around things, and like you said, there's VPNs, and for every progress, there's going to be some person that can undo that, whatever it may be, because that's the nature of what we do. We challenge each other, and I think that's what makes humans get better is we challenge each other in every aspect.
Yeah. And perfect can't be the enemy of good. I think we can all agree that privacy matters. But we can also, I don't think anybody sane would say that children should be accessing porn. Uh, Even though we all did. I found my dad's Playboys when I was like 15, but that was just Playboy. It wasn't like the stuff you see now. Like that's
Yeah.
some of it, oof, but maybe I'm just,
Exactly. It was naked ladies. It wasn't full porn. And then yeah, if they did find you did find the full porn, it was like holy crap. Yeah, I don't think I
right?
was a rite of passage of a teenager, wasn't it?
Well, and it was so much, I feel like it was a lot tamer back then, the stuff we had. This stuff is aggressive on the internet now. I don't I'm not a huge fan of it, but some of it, it doesn't, I don't know. It seems, I don't know. I would crack my back trying to do any of that. Like, no thanks. I'm good.
I try not to yuck anyone's yum, that's for sure. But and the thing is with it being global is that more and more people that have their little niches or the things that they like are they're growing those niches. Whereas before they were in little pockets, they're growing those niches.
It's actually really good. I've seen that some women's body positivity is actually up because they've seen that OnlyFans models that look more like them, they're either bigger or shorter or different races, different ages, have a fan base. And they've, instead of it always just being like a 19-year-old skinny blonde, which, we all like that, of course, but it's not the only thing people like. And it actually has, and same with like, I agree. People's fetishes, I've seen a lot of that. And while I have my own personal preferences, which actually run fairly vanilla, I have found it very interesting to see the diversity of what people are into. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you do you. It's cool. Whatever.
Absolutely, 100%. And so you've really taken on this sort of advocacy role. You go on a lot of podcasts. You do, you like to get your message out there now.
I want to try to the degree possible because I got outed and there's nothing left to lose. I I just want to show one human face because I have seen that when people don't think that we're just human beings, they fill that vacuum with a lot of nonsense that is often very harmful. And I thought if I could talk about what happened, it would maybe be a cautionary tale. I also thought if I could show that even if you hate what I've done, people listening, you could see that I'm a person just like you. And that might help with some empathy. And maybe it won't, but I thought it might. And I've known there've been smarter, better advocates. Amanda Goff is one of my favorites in Australia. I love her. She's brilliant and funny and gorgeous and hilarious. Um, but I just the Fiat Lux thing. I think you shine a light. Fiat Lux, let there be light. I think it's the same with trauma and the story that you tell of your former career and the work you're doing trying to get help for first responders. I just think nothing ever gets worse by talking about it. And for whatever degree it makes people uncomfortable, I think it's still good to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got no dramas making people uncomfortable if it's with truth and allows for growth.
When it's just sex, everybody fucks, you guys. Relax. Everybody fucks. It's how we all got here. We all got here because our mom took dick. Calm down. I'm sorry.
Love it. We're gonna leave it with that. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Amy, it's been
Your
wonderful
clip.
to meet you.
Thank you.
for
Likewise.
coming on, and thank you for sharing your story and being so open about your experiences. It's not something that we get to talk to a lot of. And like you said, the more we talk about it, the more normalized things become, and the more human we are all human beings, and that's
Yes.
all it's about. It's and there's a lot of jobs that could cause trauma, and you're sort of, as you said, you're one of the lucky ones where a huge amount. What you didn't have okay. That sounds really bad when somebody tried to kill you. But you know what I mean? It wasn't that whole seedy side of, shitty bit that we can see. So you haven't
That
had
does
that
exist,
experience,
though.
which is
That does exist. I mean,
100%, which is why we
yeah.
don't want those 16-year-olds, thinking that it's the best thing ever, and it's the way that you should aim to do life.
Yeah.
But the more we talk about it, if we consume these things, and as a society, we consume sex work hundreds of millions of times a day. So they are normal people, and they are providing a service that we use.
Yeah. And even if it does involve trauma, even if it is a profession which isn't as 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 lovely as being a surgeon or something, it don't add to the trauma by making it worse, because that, first of all, won't get rid of it, and second of all, you're just making it worse for the most vulnerable among us, the young and the poor. Even if you hate sex work, people listening to this, even if you think it's garbage, you can't tell me that you think the young and the poor just deserve to die because they decided to do something so they could buy food and shelter. I mean, come on. So yeah, I thank you for your kindness. Thank you for standing up for first responders. They saved my life. My dad's best friend is a retired detective. These are people doing a very tough job. Also, they often rescue sex workers from pimps and traffickers. They do a lot of work with underage sex workers that they can't even talk about because the victims are children. So yeah, thanks for bravely sticking up for them. And I really hope you can lobby, or whatever you call it in Australia, to get mental health funding and resources more for them. I hope
We'll throw a million seeds, and we'll just keep hoping that one will germinate. That's all we can do, is just, just keep throwing them out.
Just be pushy, never give up. That's it.
Absolutely. How can people get hold of you or catch up with Amy Taylor?
Yeah, I'm on the socials, Amy Taylor NYC, because that's where I live, and some of it's just brand deals. I get a lot of neck creams in my 40s, but sometimes I'll be posting this. If you guys want to listen to the full episode, I hope you do, and you can say hi anytime, folks.
Awesome, Amy. It's been lovely to meet you, and thank you so much.
Thank you for your kindness. I really appreciate it.
Okay, goodbye, everyone. See you at the next one. Thanks
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Call. If you like what we're about, please make sure you subscribe, and if you can leave a review, that would be appreciated. If you have feedback or suggestions for future guests, please contact me via my socials. Please share with your networks and help me expand my reach. It's a great privilege for people to share their stories and allow us to go beyond the call.